The Chinese scientist who sparked international controversy, Dr. He Jiankui, who helped create the world's first genetically edited babies, says he edited the embryos of twin girls born in China. He announced the pregnancy of another woman on an early stage with modified embryos. This would make the third genetically altered baby. On Wednesday, Dr. Jiankui spoke at the second International Summit on Human Genome Editing in Hong Kong and said that he feels proud of his achievement.
Those people, they need help. We should, for millions of families with this disease, inherited disease, or be exposed to infectious disease, we should show compassion to them. And if we have this technology, we can make it available earlier. That would be help much more people for this in need.
The scientists at the summit were harsh on their criticism and say that there are already regulated practices for preventing the transmission of HIV. But the chair of the summit, Nobel Prize winner David Baltimore, called his actions irresponsible and noted the fact that it hasn't been a transparent process.
I personally don't think that it was medically necessary. The choice of the diseases that we heard discussions about earlier today are much more pressing than providing to one person some protection against HIV infection.
Here with me now to discuss is author of Shifting Biopolitics and the Making of Modern Family, Romancing the Sperm, Diane Tober. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's start with this process. Why has it been such a secretive process? On Thursday morning, China's government ordered a halt to the work. Why was it secretive and why did this stop?
Well, I can't really speak for why was it secretive, other than the fact that the entire scientific community has pretty much already spoken out against embryonic gene editing. So you have the somatic cell gene editing, and then with this process you're editing embryos. And so that's already been determined to be unethical to edit the human germline in that regard. So among geneticists and other scholars of science and ethics and so on. And so the only reason I can think of that it would be sort of on the hush-hush would be that they already know that they're doing something that's ethically questionable and not really wanting anybody to know about it until it suddenly breaks big news and becomes a world news item. So, yeah.
Well, you mentioned a lot of ethical concerns, and there are also some safety concerns. Now,
Correct.
Could the genetic changes from these babies be passed down to future generations?
Yes, absolutely. So with somatic cell genetic engineering, for example, if you have a genetic disease and you want to remove that genetic disease, theoretically, you can do that with a living person and changing the DNA. But with an embryonic cell, what you're doing is you're replacing one item with something else. And any children that ultimate child has will also carry that mutation. So not only are you affecting that specific individual's life once they come into this world, but you're also affecting future generations, any children they may have. And the thing is, like was mentioned, that with something like HIV, which is easily preventable and you're not dealing with a genetic disease, you're dealing with something different. So I don't really even understand why they would particularly focus on this specific type of gene and disease rather than something else that is genetically heritable. And then how are they going to prove that it worked? Are they going to ultimately expose these children to HIV to say, oh yes, now these children are resistant? I really don't understand the thinking behind this process.
Well, and that's a controversy too. I mean, they are supposed to keep these people's lives private, so they can't necessarily expose them now. So his reasoning, the doctor's reasoning, was to protect babies from HIV. But what about genetically modifying these babies for enhancements, such as, say, skin color, for example, or height, or other features, physical features? Do you think that they could take it this far and we could see that in the future?
Well, yeah, and that is definitely a concern. I mean, you get back to all the concerns surrounding eugenics that we've seen throughout history and the implications for race, class, and social status, intelligence, and so on. And the thing is that when it comes to genetics, theories are constantly changing, and our knowledge is constantly changing. And you don't necessarily, genetics are not so simple as a one-to-one relationship. So you don't have one gene affecting one trait. So when you're going in and modifying the human genome, so to speak, you don't necessarily know what the ramifications of that are going to be down the road, and you're also prioritizing some people, or some individuals over others. So that is definitely a concern that genetic scientists and other ethicists have had.
Well, before we finish, I want to ask you a quick question. What could the repercussions be if these adults, once they turn 18, become adults, if they don't consent to continue to be monitored by these professionals?
Right, and that's an interesting thing, too, is that these are now infants that never consented to this process to begin with. So they are already human experiments. And so there's obviously a removal of their own empowerment or their own power in this decision-making process, and you don't know what the ramifications of this are going to be on them as adults, and you don't know what they will consent to, what they won't consent to, and whether they should even be subjected to having a life as a science experiment.
Thank you so much for joining us with your expertise, Allison. We appreciate your time.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.